Let's just grab a bit of text. What should I have this say on there? Just like one word, short word. Surfer.
Somebody said in the chat room it looked like a Baywatch poster.
Baywatch. It does look like a Baywatch. I like California Surfer. Can I combine?
That's 2 words.
You know, by short one word, I meant 2 long words. You know. All right, California. I'm gonna make. All right, I'll tell you. Well, one person said California, another person said surfer. I was like, oh, sounds good. It's cool. You know, now I can make 2 people happy. You know, working one person at a time. I've just got a few thousand more to go in the chat rooms. All right, let's change the. We're going to change the weight of our California logo here. It was at. This is, by the way, if you do get the opportunity to pick up a real font pack, and what I mean by that is, I have Helvetica New as a font pack on this computer, and what's so nice about that is it comes with a lot of different weights. We have all the way from ultra light down here. We can choose thin, light. It's the same font, and it's giving each of the characters more weight. And this is very different, by the way, than just hitting the faux bold. This is not a real bold. This is like Photoshop's version of a bold. So if you do, and I believe with the new Adobe, it's got the fonts built in, and you can either purchase, a lot of them come for free, but you can definitely purchase packages where you get all the variations of the fonts. I'm a big fan of it anyway. So anyway, a friend of mine who's a graphic designer showed me that, and it's like changed my life. It's like, man, like everything I do looks good now. Like I had literally no idea what I'm doing, but you just make one of them thin and then one of them bold, and it's like, ooh, yeah. Oh, that guy's good. There we go, California Surfer.
There's your graphic arts degree.
Yeah, you're done. Yeah, there are a lot of people who are going to be mad at me for saying that, but I don't know the difference. But to me, it's like, it's pretty good, actually. Very cool, very cool. You know what? We can bring up probably the bottom a little bit. Let's see. I don't know. Sometimes, no, I liked it with her legs. I liked it with her legs. Yeah, yeah. Very cool. So you guys can see that really didn't take too much time to do. It's very, very simple. We had 2 pictures of a surfer there and combined them together in a really interesting way. Threw a little bit of type on there, and yeah, I actually like that. I like that image. I could see that as an ad for a company who didn't want to spend a lot of money on an ad.
Putting all the graphic designers out of work here. Come on. Just kidding. That's actually a really, really tough job. All right, we've got a couple questions that are sort of general.
Okay.
And these all had 4 or 5 votes, so they were all kind of bigger topics.
Great.
First of all, Cayenne, is there a difference between using refine mask and refine edge when at the selection stage? Is one better than the other?
Okay, that's a great question. It's actually the same tool. Refine edge exists when you have a selection active. So if I make a selection, this says refine edge up here, and if I go to select, it says refine edge. Keep in mind it's right above the modify. Now, if I click on a layer mask, the refine edge button is not available, but I still can go to refine mask. But you can see it's in the same place, it's the same exact tool. They just call it refine mask because we're on a mask instead of the edge of selection. Good question.
Easy one. Let's go. We have another one. This had 5 votes. How does he create the clipping mask without using the menu? He seemed to use a shortcut.
Oh yeah, Option-Command-G will create a clipping mask. Really good question. So let's say I wanted to do here on Surfer. Let's see. I'll add let's add a color that's maybe in my image. So let's hit B for the brush tool. I'm going to sample this nice warm red. There we go. And now I'm going to make a selection. There we are. And I'm going to hit G for my gradient tool, and we'll just go from the top right down to the bottom. Notice I can't do this on my text layer because it's not rasterized, it's a vector layer. So if I bring this from the top down, just like that, we've got California Surfer. It's just visible everywhere now. And if I want this to only be visible on Surfer, all I have to do is I can right click and go to create clipping mask, or I can hit Option Command G, which is the keyboard shortcut for create clipping mask. And now I can move this gradient up and down, and I can have a lot of fun with it. Yeah, adding a little bit more. Sometimes adding even just a little bit of a gradient to text can make it look really nice. This sort of stuff I would say stay away from because it starts to look cheesy pretty quick. And yeah, muddy, exactly. But if you get something and you're like, you know what? I kind of like it, but it's not there yet. A lot of the time what I'll do is I'll hit Control or Command U, which is my hue saturation. And this way, let's just bring this over here. This way I can control on just that little gradient that I made. I can control my saturation. I can try out a couple different hues if I want. Maybe like a nice blue would wind up going out with the image very well. I can go a little bit lighter with it just to like cool it up a little bit. So I'll do this a lot of the time because I won't really know, I'll have an idea like, hey, that might look good. And then I'll come in here and play around a little bit. So don't feel like you're ever locked into a color in Photoshop. It's super simple to just go in there and change those things out. So I actually kind of like the white better, but that was probably a decent. You don't? Yeah, you guys like this better? You want to say something even cooler? All right, let's do it. I love doing this with type. I love making it look like it's shiny. I don't know why. I have an obsession with shiny things. So we're going to grab our gradient tool, and then this gradient here. So you have your linear, you have your radial, and then this guy over here. I don't even know what it's called because I'll just call it the shiny gradient, the reflected gradient. The reflected gradient is really great because it'll push out in two directions at the same time. So it's like two linear gradients stacked on top of one another. So if you paint with white and get yourself like a version of that, I'm going to hit Option Command G, which is going to clip that. Check that out. My text looks shiny now. This almost never actually works, but I always try it. Like every time I'm doing text, because you can like, yeah. Command T, you can stretch it out. Yeah. So you guys know what my Friday nights look like now. Oh yeah. What's that?
Staring at shadows and playing with those.
Yeah, I'm a very fun guy to be around, let me tell you. There we go. I like that, actually. Well, what do you guys think?
Great.
It looks like a wave.
Oh,
Ooh, good call.
it does look like a wave. See?
Clearly he did that on purpose.
Clearly.
Clearly. Quick question for 5 different people. On the layers panel, what's the difference between opacity and fill?
Okay, now that's a great question. That's a great question that I can most definitely answer right over here using this California text. So opacity and fill are so important when you're using layer effects. So when you're using layer effects, those are important. If you're not using layer effects, they don't really play that big of a role. So by default, I don't have any layer effects on my California layer, okay? So if I bring my opacity down, that's what it looks like. And if I bring my fill down, that's what it looks like as well. So right now they look like they do the exact same thing. But let's go ahead and apply a layer effects onto the California. So we're going to double click here, and then I'm going to apply, we have a lot of options. Let's try the bevel and emboss. Well, we're going to try the bevel and emboss, and I'm going to bring that up to the top left there. Okay. There we are. Now you'll notice here in my blending options, inside of my layer style, I also have an opacity and fill. So you can change opacity and fill while you're still in your layer style. So now that I have a bevel and emboss on my image, if I lower my opacity, we can see it lowers the opacity of everything. It's taking the entire layer down. So this is like the master, okay? Opacity controls the visibility of everything. Now fill does not control the visibility of my layer effects. Fill only controls the visibility of my layer. So if I bring my layer down to 0, check that out. The layer effect is still there. So I've got no fill. You can see straight through the layers, but the layer effect is there. If I turn this off, you won't see anything. But if I add a drop shadow, check that out. Now it's just the drop shadow that's going to be visible too. So sometimes you'll want to do this for like creative effects. Oftentimes, if I'm doing, I've had photos before where I wanted to create something that looked like fairy dust. So I'll just paint with like a regular old small brush and spatter the pixels around, and then I'll put an outer glow on them. And then that outer glow makes it look like those are fairy dust. And then you can drop the fill. So there we go. The difference between opacity and fill controls what's actually inside of your image, and opacity will control the whole thing. But that does not look as good. But anyway, that's what it does. And yeah, so get creative with it and have some fun. The other kind of fun thing, actually, it's kind of fun to paint around when you do this. If I paint on a layer and then I double click on this and I say like bevel and emboss that, and I hit OK and then lower the fill, I can then delete whatever on the layer, and I can now paint, and I'm literally painting with the bevel and emboss because there's no fill on the layer. So everything I paint will have that layer effect. So it kind of makes you feel powerful to be able to paint that. It's like, yeah, I'm painting with depth on my image. Anyway, yep. Do it.
We're getting to know Aaron really well right now, and this is great. Do we have any questions from anyone in the room? If not, I've got a request, and feel free to say we don't have time because we've got other stuff planned. But Janice Casori and 3 other people were wondering what you could do with photos that don't have silhouettes, because so far they've all been images that have like a very dark part of the image to work with and to composite onto.
Yes.
Do you have any images without silhouettes, and do you have anything you could do with those?
Well, we are going to be using, as part of this class, we're going to be making an album cover shortly, and that's going to fall in line with that. But I chose these images that had these silhouettes on purpose because using blending modes, and we said this at the beginning of class, but we said a lot, so it's hard to keep track of it all. But using blending modes, for the most part, plays on the differences between light and dark. So if you have a light subject on a dark background, it's going to be really easy to get those blending modes to work, or a dark subject on a light background. So for simplicity's sake, we're definitely sticking with silhouettes. For these couple examples, later in this class, we're going to get to an image where we won't be using silhouetted images. If you would like to use images that are not based on silhouettes, you can definitely just cut out your subject. If, for instance, this subject had a really complicated background, you could cut her out, and then you'd be able to use the same type of effect. The reason I would suggest cutting them out is because without being able to select out your subject, the city would just spill out onto the background too. It would still create an effect, but it'd be a slightly different effect. And I tend to like things when they're a little bit more focused in on the subject.